Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. Today I'm going to be doing some French country thrift flips using the new redesign release. For my first project, I'm going to be working on this plastic frame that I thrifted. My first step is to take the backing out and the glass as well. I'm not going to be using the glass, but I will be using the backing. I'm going to set the frame to one side and I'm going to be using Paint Couture's grounded mineral paint combined with Saltwash texture additive. I'm going to stir that really well. This is going to thicken up my paint, and then I'm going to begin adding it to the backing from the frame. And then I'm going to spread the product using a chip brush, using a dabbing and stippling motion over the entire backing piece. You can see I have allowed some of the backing colour to remain as well. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's French Putty mineral paint. Again, I'm combining this with some Saltwash texture additive, and then I'm going to start adding that to my surface, but I'm going to be using IOD's paint blades to spread that product over the backing board. The paint blade is allowing the paint to skip over the texture that we created with that first paint layer, and I'm also allowing it to skip over certain areas. I want to see those other two colors peeking up through. Ultimately, I really want this to look like old plaster. When that was dry, I took out Redesign's new Queen's Glory maxi transfer. So there are two of the same design in this pack, and it is just stunning typography. I'm loving the florals as well on this one. I'm also going to be using the cream blush blooms from Redesign's new release. I love the colors of these florals, and I think it's going to pair beautifully together with the transfer. First, I'm going to cut off the script writing on the side, the text from the bottom, and the text on both sides. There's specific elements of this transfer that I want to use and combine with the roses. Before I apply these though, I took out Paint Couture's Pacific Pearl. I'm watering down that paint and I'm going to apply almost like a wash, but I'm going to dab some of that off with a wet wipe as well. I just really wanted to lighten up that background a bit more and also just add another layer of age. I let that layer dry completely and then turned my attention to the florals. So I don't want to apply these as they appear right now. I want to cut them up and have them peeking in from the sides, framing out that transfer design in the center. So I'm going to remove the backing from the floral transfer there, and then I'm going to go over the top of the entire transfer just to get it stuck down. And then I'm going to pick up that plastic and continue rubbing and lifting as I go. I sometimes have to change directions a little bit just to make sure that I am getting all that transfer down, and I'm just going to continue rubbing the transfer down until I have that completely adhered. And then I started adding the rose on the right hand side. So I'm applying these first because I'm then going to layer in over the top of that with the Queen's Court transfer. So this is a really nice deep gold toned transfer, and I think it pairs beautifully with those lovely florals. This transfer had a lot of delicate elements to it, so I definitely took my time with this one. I then used Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin to seal over my transfers. I set this piece off to the side to dry and focused my attention on the frame. I'm going to be using Redesign's new Blooming Banners mold. This is an absolutely stunning piece that I'm so excited to be working with. I'm going to dust one of them with some cornstarch, and then I'm going to work my dust air dry clay into one of those banners, and I'm just pushing out the excess with my thumbs. I'm then going to flex the mold and then flip it over and roll that mold back to release my casting. So this is going to sit at the bottom of the frame. I'm going to gently press that into the indentation of the frame, and then I'm going to take out Angelic Aura. This is another new mold by Redesign, and I'm going to dust those beautiful elegant scroll designs there with cornstarch first. There is a left and a right version of this, and I'm then going to roll my air dry clay into a sort of sausage shape, and you can see I'm working it into that beautiful delicate design. This is a bit of a complicated mold design, so if you're not confident with clay, you could definitely use resin in this. I used clay because I definitely want to adapt this to my project. I'm going to be repositioning certain elements of it to fit in the corner of each of the corners of the frame there. So once I have the mold out, you can see I've used a palette knife to help me move that, and then I'm going to rearrange the scrolls to have them sort of curving up the side of the frame and also curving around the bottom as well. I was just really gentle as I was doing this, and I just kept playing with it until I had it sitting the way that I wanted. I then cast the mirror image version of this one to go in the bottom right hand side, and then I will be casting another one of each to go in the other corners of the frame as well. Because of how intricate these castings were, I did apply my glue directly to my frame surface to glue these in place, and I did then go back and use a wet wipe to wipe back that excess glue after I was finished gluing everything down. I let my castings dry for several hours so that they formed a crust, and then I took out Paint Couture's pitch black chalk paint, and I'm going to dab that over the top of the entire frame, really making sure that I'm getting down into all of those details. I'm using a tapered bristle brush for this one. It definitely makes painting in all of those little crevices a lot easier. And then I just continued painting the entire frame. I only ended up needing to do one coat. If I inspire you to try any of the beautiful new redesign release items, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. I will put it in the description below. I'll just get a little thank you from Redesign in return. Once the pitch black chalk paint was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic, and I'm going to apply this in the exact same way that I applied the black chalk paint, dabbing and stippling that. However, I am going to allow a little bit of that black to show here and there. I think it definitely gives it a more authentically aged look, and I really love how having the black underneath the bronze gives that bronze a sort of deeper, more antiqued tone. When that one coat of bronze was dry, it was time to add my artwork back into the frame. And here's a look at my finished French style wall art. I love how this turned out. Those transfers are absolutely stunning, and I think those molds really transformed that frame. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my second project, I'm going to be working on this large hat box. I really loved the size of it. However, I didn't love the design on the top, so I'm going to mist it with water and really allow that water to soak in. Someone had done some decoupage and added a bunch of flowers. I think they might have even been from a magazine or a calendar. It was not to my taste, and some of it was already peeling away. So I'm going to just use my paint scraper there once I have that water really sort of soaked into the images, and it's allowing me to tear a lot of that back. I did have to really take my time. I didn't want to oversaturate the cardboard of this hat box because obviously I didn't want to wreck the stability of it, but I did want to get rid of all of that decoupaged image off the top and start with a clean slate. So I just kept going until I had all of that removed. Once I finished removing as much of that image as I could, I used some sandpaper to even out that top layer. I then took out Redesign's new Blushing Blooms Fibre Decoupage Paper. This pack comes with one smaller version of the larger design and then obviously the larger piece as well. I'm going to be using the larger piece today, but I'll put that other one to one side, and I'm going to be using this particular one on the base of the hat box. I think it is stunning. It definitely reminds me of beautiful vintage fabric. I'm going to then move on to adding a primer over the top of my hat box. This is Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in white. I'm going to apply 2 coats of this. It's going to block any of that green coming through, and it's going to prepare my surface for paint. I'm obviously going to go around the rim of the hat box as well, and obviously the base of the hat box too. When those two coats were dry, I took out Paint Couture's Cozy Beige chalk paint, and I'm going to be applying 2 coats of this over the entire outside of the hat box. So the lid, the rim of the lid, and the base as well. I'm not going to paint the inside, I'm just going to give that a good wipe out. When that was dry, I took out that Blushing Bloom decoupage paper. I'm just using some masking tape to attach that to my surface. I have it lined up the way that I want, and now I'm just going to trim that to size so that I have just a single strip of that decoupage paper to work with. Now this isn't going to make it all the way around. I am going to have to cut another piece a little bit later to fill in that gap. I then took out Paint Couture's Decoupage Medium in Matte, and I'm applying a generous amount of that product to the hat box surface, and then I'm going to lay that fibre paper into my wet medium. Now whenever I am using the Redesign Fibre Decoupage Paper, I do tend to use a lot more product. It is a lot thicker, so you definitely want to make sure that it's pretty well saturated and soaking in to that fibre. So I'm just going to pull that around, make sure it's all smoothed, and I'm sort of working in sections as well, make sure I've got all of that decoupage medium in the areas where I need it, and just sort of really smoothing that all out, making sure I don't have any wrinkles. And then I'm going to go over the top of that fibre paper again with quite a generous amount of that decoupage medium. I absolutely adore this decoupage design. It is just so delicate and beautiful. I can imagine it on so many different projects. I think it would look beautiful on a lampshade. I definitely thought of that while I was working on this. I then moved on to adding another piece of that paper to the gap on the back. Unfortunately, it was never going to match up perfectly because I had to take it from a different section, but that's okay. This will just be the back design. Once that was dry, I used a craft knife to trim off the excess from the top and the bottom of the hat box. To make adding transfers over my chalk paint easier, I did use Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin over the top part of the hat box there. I just want to make sure they're going to stick really well. I did then give this a lot of time to dry. You definitely want to make sure your products are completely dry before you try and use transfers on them. I then took out Redesign's new Gentle Symphony. I love these roses. There's so many beautiful florals in this release, and this one had a lot more sort of deeper tones to it. And I'm also going to use the classic vintage labels by Redesign as well. I thought this one would look perfect on the top of a hat box. Just like with the first project, I'm going to be cutting this up. I definitely like to try and make my transfers go that little bit further, and by cutting them up, I'm able to spread them out and place them in less than obvious ways on my project. So I'm going to have this particular piece coming out from the side. I'm going to trim off that excess, and I will be able to use that on another part of this hat box. I'll just put it to one side, and then I'm going to begin rubbing and transferring that image down. I'm then going to position the other floral on the other side. And then I moved on to adding the classic vintage label in the center. I wanted this to be over the top of the other florals. And then I cut out another part of that Gentle Symphony floral transfer. We're going to have that on the bottom. So ultimately, I just really wanted it to look like the roses were creeping in from the edges, and then we've got that beautiful focal point of that French label in the center. As you can see, I have repositioned that piece that we cut off from the transfer on the left, and I'm just adding that in, and then I'm adding in a few more little florals and leaves on the edges. And then I sealed everything in using Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin. When that was dry, I took out Redesign's Tassel Fringe mold, and I'm going to be using the one that looks like that beautiful fabric style trim. Sometimes you see that design on beautiful armchairs. I thought it would be a really nice complement to the rim around the top edge of the hat box. So I've just worked some clay into one of those designs. I'm just pushing that out. Then I'm going to flex the mold, flip it over, and pull that back. I do end up casting, I think I cast 4 of them. I'm adding some Sealy's Quickset wood glue to the back of my casting, and then I'm applying it over the outside edge of the hat box lid. I'm going to push it up further to the top. I really liked how it looked from the top looking down on the Hatbox. Thought that was a really nice way of sort of framing that out. And I'm just going to position those as close together as I can. I did end up with a little bit of a gap, but once I add paint a little bit later, it's not as obvious at all. I didn't want to be too pedantic about that. I just wanted to have that be a nice little complement to this piece. I then took out Paint Couture's Oyster Pearl Luxe Metallic paint, and I'm going to be using that on those trim pieces that we glued down. My clay is completely dry. I did leave it overnight, and I'm wiping off any excess paint with a wet wipe. And here's a look at our finished floral Hatbox. I think this turned out really sweet. That decoupage paper is stunning and it goes perfectly with the new floral transfers. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my last project today, I'm going to be working on this hardcover book that I thrifted. I'm going to be using a mixture of cozy beige and Saltwash texture additive that's going to thicken up my paint, and I'm going to be applying 2 coats over the top of the front cover. So I'm really loving using this cozy beige color. We're actually using it as a base though, because I'm going to be using some decoupage paper over the top of it. When the paint was dry, I took out Redesign's new Jardin Fleuri decoupage paper. This is just like the one we used in the previous project in that you get 2 different sizes of paper. I'm using the smaller size of that design to cover this book. I'm going to be using Paint Couture's decoupage medium in matte. Again, I'm applying quite a generous coat over my surface to make sure that I have enough to really soak in to that nice thick fibre paper. I'm adding some to the spine as well, and then I'm going to bring that paper over the top of it and then press it down. I'm then going to apply some more product over the top of it, again being more generous than I would if I was using, say, a tissue paper. Once I'd finished applying it to the front cover, I used a hairdryer to speed up that drying process so that I could move on and start working on the back cover. So once that was dry, I flipped it over, and I'm going to repeat the same process that I did with the front cover, applying a generous amount of that decoupage medium to the book cover, and then adding that decoupage paper into the wet medium and pressing it down. I'm then going to go over the top of that with another generous coat. I let that dry completely, and then I took out my scissors. I'm going to make some little cuts. You definitely want to look at this as if you are covering a book. I'm sure a lot of us have done that, especially when we had to cover our books for school. So I'm just going to cut that, and then this time I'm going to be using hot glue to make sure that I have those ends really stuck down well. So I'm just sort of folding over those corners, then pulling that nice and tight, and adding glue in each of those sections so I can glue down each part of that decoupage medium. So this was a very easy way to cover a thrifted book. We have a beautiful piece of book decor that was quite easy to do, but this is something you could do over the top of journals even, and it would definitely make a really wonderful Mother's Day gift. Once I finished gluing the edges down, I then trimmed off the excess from the top part of the spine of the book. I'm going to add some more glue, and then I'm going to gently press that in and secure it in place. Next, I took out Redesign's classic vintage labels again, and I'm going to be using this as my front cover design for my book. So I'm just going to position this over the top of my dry decoupage medium, and it definitely made it very easy to transfer this because I had that dry decoupage medium down. To seal my transfer, I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Extreme Guide in Satin. I'm going to seal the transfer with this, but I then went in and did another coat over the entire book. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic, and I'm going to be going in and applying that bronze to some of the details of the transfer. So I definitely wanted to bring in some of the bronze or sort of gold tones to give this a bit more of a regal look. Obviously, this is optional. You definitely could have just stopped with having the decoupage fibre paper on the book, or even just the transfer. I then took out Paint Couture's Embossing Medium, and I'm just going over the top of this stencil that I had in my stash. I really love this Fleur de Lis design. I think it ties in perfectly with the French style that we're going for, so I'm going to add those in each corner. And then once they were dry, I took out Redesign's new Opulent mold. This is so stunning. It's got some beautiful key lock designs there, but I'm going to be using this stunning one here. I'm not even sure what you would call it. It's sort of like a emblem almost, but it is so beautiful and elegant. I can definitely see myself using this one in the future. I'm just working that dust air dry clay into it, then I'm going to flex it and then roll my mold back to release it. And here I'll just give you a bit of a closer look. It is stunning. I made 2 of them, and I'm applying some of my Sealy's Quickset wood glue to the back of them, and then I'm going to be bending them around my book spine. I thought this was a nice little touch, and I'm going to add 2 of them. And that's why I used air dry clay. I want the flexibility of being able to bend these around those edges. I gave my castings enough time to form a crust, and then I took out Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Antiquing Glaze, and I'm really working it into the details of those beautiful castings. This is going to give them a lot of definition, and it's going to add to that vintage old world look. So I'm using a mister to also help move the product into those crevices, and then I'm going to be using a wet wipe to pull some of that back. I'm going to be applying the glaze over each of those castings, but I am going to work in sections because the clay is obviously unsealed, so it will suck up that glaze quite quickly, and I want to have enough time to remove as much or as little as I want. I'm also removing it from the fibre paper as well. I also added some of the glaze and wiped some of it back to the raised stencil details on the front. I then went around the edges and added some of the glaze to the edges to give the book an overall look of being weathered and worn. I wanted to bring in some more bronze, so I'm just going over the top of the raised stencil Fleur de Lis, and then I'm also adding that bronze to some of the details of the castings. And here's a look at our finished book. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. I love the combination of those beautiful molds with the decoupage paper and the transfers. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video and that it's inspired you to try some of the beautiful new release items from Redesign. Let me know if you had a favorite project from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find my affiliate links in the description below and a full product list. Thanks for watching.